Welcome to the Style and Vibes podcast with me, Michaela. I'll be giving you the inside scoop on music, fashion, culture, and more from Caribbean celebrities and tastemakers across the globe, pushing our culture with authenticity and, of course, style and vibes. So we are continuing our conversation. I had Kadeem end on an interesting thought because what came to my mind initially was the idea of homophobia and its presence being absent from Caribbean as an identity for individuals who are of that community. So you were saying how this guy was just like, you were in China and the guy was essentially saying they have gay people in Jamaica. And it was such a revelation to him at that moment that it actually made you upset that you would even think that, like, we're all over the place. What are you talking about? So for him, it was a sort of revelation of cultural awareness that he had never had, because probably perceptually all of the images and things that he had seen and heard and felt about Jamaica, it wasn't that. And for you, it was just like, how can you just do you think that we just don't exist anywhere else? So it was kind of puzzling. But also when you were sharing about a lot of the stories that come out of Jamaica referring to homophobia are often very violent. It's about asylum and it's about, escaping something. But the community has been there for a very long time. I've heard stories from, my mom or, cousins or aunts and uncles, and it doesn't seem, I didn't grow up there, so I don't know, right? But it doesn't feel like they didn't know people of that community and that was happening all the time. Like these deaths were the thing, or so, but it has become such a big part of the stories that you hear. And it's primarily the reason, going back to the lyrics, why Boom Bye Bye was so, like, the lyric, it was like this perfect storm of lyrics that were completely violent, as well as what the stories that were happening, the support that the community was receiving abroad in terms of asylum and understanding, because not only where we were going through here, that sort of political stance around the LGBTQ plus community as a whole, they were just like, okay, it's not just us. We have to go and make sure that this experience is highlighted everywhere. And how can we help in that sense? So those became the stories. So it's either this one spectrum or this other. And you and Robert really kind of are talking about all of it and everything in between. Tell me about that piece, because you can be of the queer or LGBTQ plus community and still embrace your culture in a rich way. And to me, you guys really bring that to the forefront of your platform. So I'd love for both of you to really expand on some of the things that I know I said a lot, but just how all of this has really impacted you.
Yeah, the Caribbean is a beautiful and complicated place. And I think I'll sort of like work my way in a circle, right? Like the note about asylum that queer folks in the Caribbean will sort of like use to truly flee that violence, I don't think is a fleeing of the Caribbean, right? Like no one wants to leave their home, right? Like the touch points that make it familiar, the things that are there and like our memories that sustain, like no one wants to readily just like leave, right? There's something that makes it so that people must leave. And when you do leave and you enter diaspora, that diasporic connection means that like you now are like working to recreate a thing, make a copy of a copy in a place where you are like not deeply rooted or connected to it, hoping and assuming that like the place that you once were can be where you are now. So with that being said, I think that what we're attempting to do, especially with the podcast, is that there are so many things that can exist at once in complexity. We can hold all of those things, and it doesn't take a lot of work to do it either. Right? Like, we get to be all of these things because we are all of these things. We are the intersection of being affected by and deeply harmed by some of the thoughts that go into the creation of Boom Bye Bye, and also really loving that song. Like, it's good. It's so good.
Mm-hmm.
I get to question how it's possible for, Buju allegedly hopped out the car and then all of a sudden was like, the world is in trouble, right? And then goes off into this really beautiful tirade about the violence that like he needs to inflict against queer, in particular, gay men, right? So I'm pretty sure that there are people who are like listening to this right now and going like, I'm confused. Is it okay for me?
No, I don't think so.
Great.
I think it's such a complicated thing that like, it's like, okay, I've observed that. So I'm like, okay, I've seen this play out, and we still for whatever reason love the song, and it happens a lot with misogynist lyrics in hip hop as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love Snoop Dogg's first album. That was a misogynal mess of a first album, but I still sing the lyrics as if I was, like we have problematic lyrics that we are enamored with. So I think it makes sense, but we're also in a space where we can acknowledge that enamorment and disassociate ourselves with the actions in real life, if you know what I mean. So it makes sense.
Yeah. This is where I want to bring Kadeem into it, right? Like, it is worth noting, and when I say worth noting, I mean like there's like some profound shit going on there for in part one, where you were like, dance hall allowed for a sort of like bringing together of engaging with dance hall music and an exploration, a heightening, increased relationship to queerness, right?
Mm-hmm.
The dance hall space makes that possible, right? And like, if we want to continue to increase the complexity around this, dance hall lyrics attempt to do one thing, which we might, they don't say anything, but we want for this purpose to assume that like it's there for the oppression of queer people in the Caribbean. And also is the space where resistance happens, where meaning and belonging is facilitated.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to do one thing and you're doing a lot more.
And
you tell us.
Girl, as you were talking, you always do this thing, like things are just coming up for me, and Buju Banton and Boom Bye Bye for me, because two things on that. I think it was Key Miller, who is a prominent queer or gay Caribbean writer, who sort of like wrote about how Boom Bye Bye is such a queer ass song, by sort of like how it's imagined and how the lyrics is like, hold two man feet each up on a kitchen, like the visual description of two men coming together and having sex and coitus. It's such a queer thing to sing a song about two men having sex. I'm sorry, that's just it, right? And I like it, and as Robert said, it's doing this one thing. It does a lot of things, as Robert says, but like we're focusing on this one thing right now, and yet it's also allowing for because how many young queer folks, for so many young queer folks, how many of them was that song the first kind of queer envisioning that they ever had, right? And that's a very important thing to think about, sort of like where that homophobia exists, so too is that ability to imagine homosexuality existing freely. If we just simply took away what what we're sort of like having, which is that judgment, which is that, and that's compounded for several other things, right? That space where like the girls are saying boom bye bye, nobody want head room and nobody want them off dead. And then the verse of describing two men itch-upping and loving and caressing each other, like that's sexy. That's sexy as fuck. Can I curse? Can I curse?
It's also a rebellion, if you will, because it's almost like, you know, when your mom says, don't touch that, don't touch that, don't touch that. Mm-hmm. And then you go and you touch that because you want to experience it for yourself. So instead of its intention.
Michaela, what kind of lie you try to tell Paul little poor bonjour? Man, I tell the people that lie about bonjour in a girl. Man, I get so.
Not at all. But what I'm saying is, it kind of makes sense in terms of just the not the artists themselves, but if you're listening to it, it's this forbidden act that makes it a little bit more enticing, if you will, because if it's such a hot topic, if it's so discussed so frequently, then there must be something there that feels good about it as to why we keep talking about it. It's something I've never thought of, so that's why I'm kind of exploring that route with you down. We're going down the path, down the lane.
It shows up in more lyrics too, right? Like you reference the number 2, right? Terra Fabulous song, right? If we do a close textual analysis of the lyrics, right? Close textual, right?
Let me pull it up.
The hook.
Okay.
The song, right? The first 2 lines, right? Some man a play number 2, right? And then he goes into say enough man a oil and a Vaseline.
Girl,
how do you know that?
Right?
Who told you? Which
but also like for so many reasons too, right? Because I'm not going to admit to using any oil or Vaseline for any reason. I'm not that kind of girl. I'm not coming on to people in podcasts and talk about my sexual escapades. The girls, in some of their first experiences, oil, Vaseline, baby oil in particular, tends to serve as lube. Like that tends to be like a very like young kind of experience, because like you can't just go to the pharmacy at 15 and go buy lube, but you can't pick up the Vaseline that's in your grandmother's room, right? And like I think in addition to yes, how do you know and how are you so hype, there is something about the hyper specificity of the oil and the Vaseline, particularly in the Caribbean context, where like the girls didn't know what lube was, the girls were using baby oil. Right. And I know this to be a thing because of like growing up in the Caribbean and I had queer friends I still have queer friends in the Caribbean, right? And oil and Vaseline are very 2 important props in our world. So there is something about this hyper how specific it is that once also speaks to this queer Caribbean upbringing or this queer Caribbean like sexual life, which is really interesting that like he's bringing that out. He's bringing out both the yes, how you know that, but also the fact that like younger people in their experiences, they're using what they have, and this is the I don't know. There's something about this how specific it is that really highlights. It raises some questions. Yes, how you know, but why put it there? What function does it serve with the oil and the Vaseline being there? Like for me, I don't know. There's something that also it's at the beginning. He's lubing up the conversation for how he's talking about women. There's the position of it as well. There are certain things that for me, just this song is very queer as well,
But I also think it's the automatic association that queerness is associated specifically with gay men, right? Mm-hmm. And those two and by being a gay man, in order to be a gay man, you have to want to emulate a woman. And that's a huge association that I think has been around for a very long time, not just within the Caribbean community. But you can be what is deemed as a masculine gay man and not be feminine and be gay. And that isn't, at that time, wasn't quite understood as something, unless it was, outside of the whole buggery or molestation type of conversation. So it's that associate. So it's almost like, the association with, and we're going into deep analysis here. I wasn't even planning on going down this road, but it's almost like the conversation around women and the conversation around gay men coexist because there are so stereotypically, there are so many ideals between the two in the terms of how they behave in real life, quote unquote. Like,
can I get a wow?
Can I get another wow? Give me a wow. Call the ambulance. Wow. Because right? Like the anti-queerness that exists, it's very anti-woman. It's very and it's very misogynistic, right? And like
questions to ask for a shift, right? Is, can people who are having heterosexual sex also not use lube?
Yeah.
Might that also be a thing that like you might want to use? Maybe. Yeah. Right? So there the when, if we can like pause and like tap into like the misogyny piece for a hot second, right? Yeah. There is this referring to a woman in the Caribbean as like spicy and like having pepper is like one thing that shows up, I think, in the Terror Fabulous song one, right? And then also Buju comes in with Boom Bye Bye, and then he's bringing in this element of like, what is the sweetness between the legs, right? So there's like this spicy and there's this sweet, but notice how like women show up in the lyrics. Right? What is the purpose, the presence, what function does invoking imagery of women and like what is going to be done to women do for the song? Who is in control in the entirety of the song? It's men, right? Men are terming who people are, what purpose it is that they get to serve in any given relationship, and then like what needs to be done to them. And then what we miss from this entire conversation is the way that other women love other women, right? So when we talk about like this naming and this domination, there's a naming that happens for gay men that then leads to their violence and killing and erasure. And then there's a naming of women and a misnaming of women also that leads to erasure and violence and reduces the possibilities for there to be more beyond this. Because what's important for us and like what we've been doing in this entire conversation is going like, yes, we can zero in on gay identity, but then we zoom out to queerness because there's more that's happening in the lyrics that speaks to through misogyny, through homophobia, and then also through class, right? If we're talking about like navigation, like who is safe in the Caribbean, who's able to express their identities where they want to, there's a class component to that as well. Class allows you to seek asylum. Class allows you to navigate the Caribbean in a certain way in safety.
Mm-hmm. 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 Because it's not, it's really important to note as it relates to sort of like the violence and death, where they occur, to whom they occur. And oftentimes we're going to realize that it is the poorest, it is the darkest of skins, it is the fat queer folks, it is the queer folks with disabilities. It has a huge thing to do with folks' proximity to class and recognizing that the uptown queers are perfectly fine. They're not okay. I'm not gonna say perfectly fine. That's too much. But the girls are not thinking about death in the way that they have to.
Yeah.
The girls are not thinking about violence being enacted the way that some other girls have to. And I think that's a very important thing to note here, that like It's the poor folks who are experiencing this. So what are we really saying? And then also going into class a little bit and talking about sort of like when tourists come to the Caribbean, like gay tourists are fine, and we talk about like, yeah, they say, yeah, come to the Caribbean, we want your gay money, like your gay money is really helpful here, we love you if you're gay tourists are perfectly fine. There is this kind of thing as well where the over reliance we have on tourism allows for what we call our values and our systems, which is to be anti-queer, is somehow dissolved, it somehow dissipates, and unless it's about poor queer people. And that's like a really important thing to recognize as well. Yeah.
This all comes through in the songs, right? Like we have like moved beyond like what we might want to be like as like the skeleton of this conversation, but like this still shows, like it shows up in the music and it shows up in the response to the music. We weren't 100% sure in part one about Buju's attempted alleged cancellation, but I believe earlier when we were talking, the reason why Boom Bye Bye gets removed sort of like from the public record is because white queer folks wanted to come to the Caribbean. And I believe that he was going to be performing at a concert, and they're like, no, you can't do that over here because we don't want that, right? So the tourism tie-in, the international sort of like queer politicking tie-in, and then like this cancellation of a thing that is steeped in culture, trying to cancel that, questioning whether cancellation culture operates in the way that it's supposed to operate. Are you also not trying to erase, without doing any sort of intentional work, the cultural codification that we see in Boom Bye Bye? What is lost there? By trying to cancel him abroad, what pieces of the Caribbean do you continue to misunderstand, misrepresent, and try to cancel as well?
And this is not to say, I was gonna say, and this is not to say that Buju and every other folks who sort of like perpetuate it shouldn't have some level of accountability, but that accountability cannot happen unless queer Caribbean people are in the room. And oftentimes we see the articles, top 15 homophobic country in the world. Jamaica is number 1, 2, or 3. And you look at the writers, it's 2 white people from Minnesota who've been to the Caribbean once. And who judge the Caribbean and use different indices that have nothing to do with what would really be done, such as if Jamaica have laws that protect hate crime laws, if Jamaica has hate crime laws, as if hate crime laws are actually successful here. Let's be honest about the efficacy of hate crime laws and what it's doing and what it's not doing, right? And I think it's and Robert hears me go off all the time. I have probably said it 3 times on our podcast. It really pisses me off that an article is written that sort of like categorize, or rather characterizes, the Caribbean as this top homophobic place that doesn't necessarily take in the experiences of queer Caribbean people who are actually there. There haven't been many queer Caribbean writers who are actually writing about their experiences in the Caribbean. When The Guardian posts one of their 50 million articles on how homophobic the Caribbean is. This is not to say we ain't got our issues, and this is not to say whatever. It is to say that this kind of whiteness, this kind of whitewashing around our pain and suffering really just perpetuates it, right? Like it's not helpful that we're taught that, you know, folks are going to write all these different articles on how homophobic our songs are, but doesn't capture like the complicated relationship that queer people have to dancehall. And it doesn't capture the fact that queer people can safely be queer in the dancehall scene and have been, right? And also have not been. It's very obviously, again, it's a way more nuanced. It's not binary. It's not you're either safe or you're either not. It's a lot of gauging. It's a lot of nuances and a lot of things that people have to factor. When I went to a Caribbean party in LA, this DJ was like, I don't care if I'm going to get deported. I'm going to play this song for you all. And he played Boom Bye Bye. And I got up on the table and started whining and started like, whatever. And folks were looking at me because they were like, folks who had stopped because they didn't support what was going on, looked at me like questioning what was going on. Like, why is that the case? I'm gonna enjoy the song because here you are promoting my death, and that's cool. Do your thing, but we have to have an accountability conversation. And my dancing is not necessarily as easy as, oh, Kadeem loves this song, so therefore queer people think it's perfectly fine. That's not it. It is that our relationship is different, and it is that there is something about the song that draws us to it, that creates some kind of pleasure, and we can hold that, and also hold that white folks aren't necessarily doing a really good job of characterizing our pain, and also hold that we need to figure out a way in which we can hold all of these different artists that sort of profit off of this kind of violence accountable.
Me and Robert are like, that's a word.
Right, because what is...
We're pressed.
What is the accountability process here? Is there one?
That's the question.
But I think what you said, a lot of what you said was important, specifically the complicated piece that hasn't really been captured, which is why a platform like yours is really key, because essentially you're peeling back the onion and it's many layers and it's a continued conversation. So, and I think that there's this misrepresentation and understanding that the people who are queer in the Caribbean can't live and can't function. And it's just like, no, this is more of a human rights issue than being able to be respected in your spaces and being able to exist and be seen. And it's more about, like you said, people don't want to leave their homes. They just want to feel comfortable in the place that they do call home. And I think some of that reckoning is kind of happening now. And I think it's even more interesting that you talk about, some random writer just writing about, something that is going to get hits. And for me, it kind of feels like this modern day colonial thought of, I need to go and help these people because they're in such sufferation and they need me to, we need ally, we need help, but you can't define what that help looks like. It's up to that community to decide how they need to be helped. And you just said so much. It gave me chills.
I mean, the one thing I'll just say too, though, is that like it's lazy work. It's lazy work to write an article that says top 20 homophobic, and quite frankly, it oftentimes just stops right there. And like there is no, well, how about we find the foundation that's doing the work and raise money,
like highlight
and
the progression that is happening, the work that is being done.
Honestly, I don't even care about that too. Right. I personally even like whatever progressions are happening, like highlight those too. But quite frankly, the girls need money. Like give the girls the money that they need to exist in this world. I think like my position and sort of like what these folks who sort of like write these articles, white people, 98%, and the 2%, I will make space for the fact that I know 2 queer Caribbean people who are writing about these experiences, and I also disagree with how they do it. So I'll also say that because it is in a way where like the spotlight comes on the Caribbean as homophobic and then it stops there. But there's not a conversation of like on the ground movements that are happening that like, folks had made like J-Flag had worked on propositions to repeal buggery, and the government was like, oh, actually, we're going to make that a people issue. So we're going to put it like a referendum to vote. Like these are things that are happening right now, right? And like these are things that like, even if you try to capture it. But all you just like capture the one little something now, you're not gonna tell the people what to do. Yeah, somebody from Ohio. I getting this whole top 10 homophobic places, but not 10 ways in which you can support LGBTQ folks in the Caribbean. Like the framing, it's lazy journalism, it's lazy work, it's lazy travel blogging, and that's oftentimes what it is. It's a travel blog, but like it brings up this kind of heightened focus on our lives in a way that doesn't help, right? So now folks have to deal with this extra attention that's going to happen, this conversation that's going to happen, but nothing is going to come of it. And I think it's that frustration, right? Like you can't just say, actually, you know what? I feel like I'm going to repeat my point like 6 times. So I'm going to stop right there. But all this to say, it's annoying.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about specifically, you know, those songs were of like the 90s era. How do you think the music has changed, and what work has been done in your opinion from a lyrical standpoint? I kind of shared in the last podcast, it's not as blatant, it's, you know, a little bit more subtle. There is more, yeah, I think it's just more subtle. I don't think it's gone. I think there are innuendos, and I think, you know, it also has come with this new open door, like this new sexual energy that is happening. So I think especially during that oral sex wasn't a thing, okay, and now it's a thing that people talk about, that people enact. I've seen videos, I've seen not porn, but like
not you cite. You're citing the policeman, aren't you? You're talking about the policeman.
No, no. I wasn't talking about the policeman. I was literally talking about, like, so I remember like Alkaline had a song and it talked about body washing, and you know, Aishana has come out with, you know, the Ed Sheeran remix to that song where she had talked about, you know, threesome and all of those sexual things. Dovey Magnum talks about oral sex, and I'm just like, well, all these women are giving oral sex and not getting anything. I don't know Jamaican women that operate that way. So, you know, as oral sex has become more popular, and that was heavily associated with the gay community, so has gayness and queerness in the dance hall. It's kind of softened its barrier a bit. There are still men who are definitively stating their claim to being a heterosexual, but there's a little bit more freedom in terms of the raunchiness and directness of the lyrics that have made queerness a little bit less. I don't think it's like the gates are open, but I think it's a little bit more freeing, if you will. But that's just my outsider assumption. What are your thoughts in terms of the progression of lyrics and the space itself, and how it has changed? And I know you're now like an adult partying here, so it's definitely vastly different. It's even more freeing here than but what are your thoughts? Robert is like, I don't go nowhere.
Well, I'm wondering if there's like a gender component to this, right? Like as more women enter the dancehall reggae scene, do we also see a shift in the lyrics, right? Like I'm remembering Ramping Shop, which was like early 2000, sorry, like late or like mid to late 2000s, right? And like that has men and women on the song teaming up against the gays. So and I believe like they then bring in like women, like man to, maybe, I believe so, right?
Man to man, girl to girl, that wrong scandal.
Yeah, right. Which, so
okay. Go ahead.
But like, so like we have that, and then like again, I'm jumping, but then we have Spice who comes in, and again, I don't know like the line itself in particular, but she says something about like Scooby-Doo draws or like something like that, where I only stiff cooking use Met Gal come, right? So like she comes in and she reinforces that what men were saying in the 90s about like stiff buddy is the only thing that's like going to happen in the sexual liaison. She comes in, she goes, yeah, that's it, because like that is the marker of a true man. But then we have other people of the queer persuasion or not coming in and going, but everyone can kind of just like do this thing that is oral sex, and like that is fine for you to go ahead and do that, and it doesn't speak to your manhood or not. What I think is the line between all of this is that there are certain people in dance hall, the dancehall artists, who have enough cultural capital to be able to demand things of people in society, right? One of the earlier artists that we were talking about has this line where he's like, but what Minna test number 2, what about you? Right? There's this call to go, I'm not doing this, what are you doing? Right? How does that keep happening in the lyrics later on into the 2000s, the 2010 teens area to now? Like, what calls are being made at each other, and who has enough power and capital culturally? Who is like of the best dancehall artists to be making demands of what it looks like to be a man, what it looks like to be a woman, in heterosexual relationship or not, demanding what of other people? Are we seeing that there's a loosening of the hold that music has on culture itself, right? Like, we love to say that culture informs music and music informs culture, but there's a rift, a necessary rift that's going on, where there's a loosening going on, but like, what is the reason for that?
I'm not answering Robert's question. I mean, I know. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was clarifying your question. The reason for the rift, or the reason that.
The reason for the rift. Okay. And I tend to ask questions that like don't need to be answered, but we kind of just like sit with them to go, well, there is something going on here. It had a grip on us from, the the 80s really until like the early 2000s, and then now it's loosening.
Yeah.
What is it that is creating for that expansion between how music literally and lyrically defines how sex is able to happen? Something is like some work, right? Progress or not, is being done there. What is it?
Yeah, I'm thinking about like dancehall serving as this initially, when the girls sort of like got into the dance, it's this thing to talk about slackness. Dancehall is about slackness, and I like back in the days, the girls were going off, right? Like Lady Saw had the lyrics, like the very slack, lewd, sexually deviant kind of things that really went against what the values, I guess, were of the country at the time. And I'm seeing now a very similar thing with that. And I'll be very transparent. I'm not every single dancehall artist I listen to. No. Like, I like Skillibeng, I like Malika Shenseao, etc., etc. And I'll say why I say that in a bit. But there has always been women singing about the things that women should not sing about, right? And yes, the oral sex also has a lot to do with men and their refusal. But I'm also thinking about people like Queen Lady, Gangsta, and Shenseea, and Queen Lady Gangsta, who in her one viral song is like, "Me love cocky and me love pussy too. For touch me, baby, what you gonna do?" Him say him want me, and she say him want me too. She says she want me too. Like this kind of bisexuality that's happening in the lyric, which live for, right? I think there has always been this thing of women singing about their sexual deviance, either in their acts and what they do. and it being a queer thing. And I think now what's happening is that I don't want to say with progression, with time, the lyrics have gotten more lewd and more open, because I think that's a really, that's a claim that I don't feel confident backing up right now in this moment. But what I will say is that that consistent women singing about their experiences with as the person who's doing things that they're not supposed to do because they're women in a Jamaican society. um that's there's this openness that's happening now, right? And like, I can cite Queen Lady's lyrics because I listen to it every single day. um uh but like Shensia singing at Jamaica's Pride some years ago, D'Angel doing the same. Like every year there's some kind of dancehall artist. Every year there is this kind of meshing that's happening, right? Um, that for me doesn't feel new as much as it doesn't feel new as much as it feels familiar. Based on sort of like what I've read and understood around like how queer people have existed in the dancehall space and how queer people have made the dancehall space theirs. Like, if you listen to the Fish Tea podcast, they talk about this thing that used to happen called the Batty Party. That used to happen in Jamaica. That's like queer gatherings. First of all, that's a great name. But like queer people gathering and dancing to dance hall, and then being in New York now and seeing like queer people dancing, like the Bashment Girls doing the head top spin and the head top drop on their back. Like I like, there are lyrics that allow for all these different things to happen, and I see that now. But I think it's also because I think 20, 30 years ago, I would have been in the space where I would see something similar, with sort of like how people responded to and performed artists' lyrics and their songs. All this to say, kind of went all the way around, but all this to say, do I notice a progression? I notice an openness, and I notice this kind of where dancehall artists are not saying or asserting their cis heterosexuality. There is this quietness, there's this silence that like, all right, I just love girls and that's it. Or I love my women and it doesn't, I love my women at the expense of men. Or I love my women at the expense of queer men. I don't see that, I don't experience that with the music that I listen to as much. Every now and then, yes. But that's with men. With women artists, I see a lot more openness and a lot more, I'ma do this thing, but I find that to be a consistent thing that has happened throughout women performing in dancehall. I just find that the topics become a little bit more gray, because I don't know if 30 years ago, if somebody had said bisexuality, they would have, like what the reactions would have been. But that's what I see. I see this openness. I see this willingness to I see this kind of heightened focus on silence, one, but then openness by with women too. So that's what I would say. I don't know if I would say progression or non. I think it's that itself, in and of itself, feels like a binary. And like I can say, yeah, Spice doesn't say scorn them anymore, and Spice does a really great job, posting queer people on her Instagram and hiring queer people. But like, that's Spice, and I think it becomes a little bit individualistic. Queen Africa is still banned in some countries, like, so, and she's out here just being quiet. Not that Queen Africa is a dancehall artist, she's just the person who came to my mind right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I think.
Robert, what are your thoughts on the work being done? I like that so much. I'm just gonna use it all the time.
Work is being done. That's
work is being done.
It's been a question that came up in my meditation practice, and now I'm just like, well, what work is being done? Right. Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not sure because I can't say that like music isn't my space, but like, the type of music I listen to is, you know, not. Here's where I tap into the queer granny identity. So I, you know, take on the Caribbean. Like that's me. So it's giving sitting on the veranda, making you a cup of tea, you know, feeding you and listening to grace thrillers and like 80s, 90s reggae and looking at the young people and going, but dancehall music don't sound too nice. I mean, it's like I will like enjoy it, but like I'm not like in the dancehall world. And because of like this like polish of care that is the Caribbean granny identity, um, dancehall for me and like looking at it, I feel like I'm almost like experiencing it because like dancehall is like being produced in and like marketed to people of like my age, and at the same time I'm sort of like sitting out removed from it going, I'm seeing some things in operation here that I wish we didn't do anymore. And I don't want to come across as like not thinking that people deserve to have their own expression and to do whatever the hell it is that they want to do, as long as they're not oppressing somebody, right? To like bring this into the diaspora outside of the Caribbean, right? Like Cat Williams has been, you know, going viral as of late because of a comment that he made on the like Joe Budden podcast, right? Where he was like, if you can like make jokes without sort of like using specific derogatory and offensive language, then you were never funny. I believe it's possible for you to make really amazing music and not oppress people at the same time. It's possible. You just need to do the work, right? So Kadeem talks about like lazy journalism. I might apply the same thinking to that and like songwriting and performance, right? Where it's like you can do some additional work, some different work to continue to produce something that is good and doesn't oppress people. That's my wish, right? Like when we go back to how queerness functions here, like there is some futurity, there is some work that I don't think in the sort of like direct music industry I have anything to say about. I really don't. People can listen to me and be like, who the hell is Robert? Who the hell am I? I don't know. But what I am saying though is that like there are some societal things that I'm seeing manifesting in here that like if we will like shift our language, we as a society, as a culture, as a people will be in a better place. And I think I'm also like shifting my tone a little bit because yesterday in a conversation with Kadeem, I was like, I don't think I'm here to be like policing the words that people use, right? Because when we're talking about few or two, I'm like, listen, if you want to use few or two, do what you want to do. I don't care. I'm not going to sit here and like beg you to shift it. But what I will say is that now that there is some additional work being done, now there's some openness, I believe it's possible, maybe not right now, but possible in the near future that the lyrics will begin to shift the language. And that shift will then happen both like culturally and like interpersonally, where more songs might not use few. Someone might intentionally put the two and like redress it. Have it show up differently so that people continue to practice culturally the use of language that is open, that is affirming, that is non-oppressive, that allows people to live their lives and to enjoy music, because that's why you're producing the thing, aren't you?
Aren't you?
Aren't you? Are you? Why are you doing this? Why are you here? What is your purpose in life? Maybe the people need to go to a meditation retreat to start asking themselves some deep questions about why it is they do the things that they do, having heard that it is not so great.
You know what? I think that's a great place to end. It brought us back full circle to the number and how we are just exploring the identity around it, and in turn our own connection to the number. So Thank you guys so much for just joining me. I have to really just thank you guys so much. This was so much fun. I really love, having these kinds of conversations, and you guys were highly insightful as well as entertaining. A little mess, like you promised.
Just a little. Just a little twip. Just a little twip, you know? You know?
I mean, we do say mix up and blend.
Right.
Exactly. So, of course, please share, what you guys have coming up as a team separately with Stush and Bush, of course. We want to make sure that we're highlighting some of the stories that you guys have told and are continuing to tell on your platform.
Yeah. So, if you're like, we want more conversation with you, we're out there on Instagram at Stush and Bush, no D, right? STUSHAN, because that's the only way to spell Ann. Bush, BUSH. And if you want to DM us there, that's cool. If you want to email us and be like, well, I want to continue the conversation, we're truly open to also hop on a phone call, a Zoom call. Don't text me because I don't like texting, and just talk, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to talk and to think and to ask questions.
Yeah. Give us a few days or weeks in advance though, if you're trying to do that, because
so we can
have things.
Yeah, we have to prepare. But also you can just follow us and reach out to us as well. Robert's is Queer Rib Granny. We also do this every time. Robert does the Stush and Bush part, and I do the individual handles. You can follow Robert at Queer Rib Granny, obviously. QUEERIBGRANNIE. You can follow me at Kadim, KHADIEME, or at Sketto Drinks, which is this cool little home bartending thing I'm doing because, hobbies. But yeah, and what you can expect from us. We have more episodes coming up where we're going to talk about a lot of really cute things and have more guests. If this is the first time you're hearing about us, you're lucky, because we have 4 seasons. 4 whole seasons of content that will catch you right on up. Start from the top so you can see our natural progression as well.
We also have a website, Queeribian.com. And there's some cool resources there that sort of take it out of the podcasting world and sort of in the larger, what is the theoretical thing going on in the background? Very interesting.
Yeah, and obviously if you want to donate, because why we're not gonna say that, you can donate Venmo, Cash App at Queeribian. Thanks.
Please and thanks.
Thanks. just in case your pocket look full, I say, all right, a Pride Month, a Black Music History Month, and a Caribbean American Heritage Month. Come on, we did all 3 today.
Donate 3 times.
I'm gonna switch off the Pride Month one as soon as I hang up.
Right.
But this
Thank
was
you guys.
Great, Michaela.
I really enjoyed having you guys. It was such a pleasure. Thank you again for sharing your voices. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Style and Vibes podcast. If you like what you hear, and I know you do, share it with your friends and family. If you want more, make sure you visit styleandvibes.com and follow us on our social channels, Twitter and Instagram at Style and Vibes. Until next time, Leah Tommy Peeps.